Good morning, and thank you very much for coming here. It's good to see you. We are now in day 4 of our response to the widespread flooding throughout southern West Virginia. I want to start out by thanking everyone for the amazing work that they're doing. And today I start with the folks on the ground, the people that are just toiling, the first responders, the local law enforcement, quite frankly, the volunteers that are doing everything imaginable to help their fellow citizens in need. Yesterday, I did a tour in southern West Virginia to assess the damage firsthand, and I had a chance to meet some amazing people. I first met some people who seem to have lost everything, and these are some of the challenges that we go through right now. I want to send a message that the state is looking to do everything possible through its efforts and its resources to be helpful. I met people at the Williamson Fieldhouse who are volunteering, trying to help people in need, taking time out of their day to make sure that they're looking out for their fellow West Virginians. I saw so much volunteer effort and food and water and people that cared so much. That's the West Virginia way. And so it's appropriate to thank those folks on the ground, the local emergency management teams, the first responders, the citizens of those areas. That's the lifeblood of West Virginia. Yesterday, I was down in McDowell and Mingo counties, and I tried to go to some of the hardest hit areas to survey damage and meet some of the local officials. It became clear to me that federal assistance was required in southern West Virginia because we need to do what we can to get communities back on their feet and being strong. That's why yesterday I requested an emergency disaster declaration from President Trump, which could unlock some of the federal resources and energy to help support our recovery efforts. I've already had good conversations with the Trump administration, who've offered their support to our region during this challenging time, and will be doing so again. In fact, I was scheduled to be up in Washington, D.C. today. I'm obviously staying here, given the conditions on the ground. That was to an unrelated issue, an EPA announcement. But I want to mention that we're going to do everything we can to protect our people. That's job one. I expect that the highest priority counties in the declaration request should be received favorably, because the conditions on the ground, in particular, and a few of them, are very challenging. Now, due to the nature of the flooding that we've seen, high water rescues have become very important in southern West Virginia. We don't have exact numbers, but we can say that there have been many. We believe that that total is over 60 to 65, and a lot of people, the help of the National Guard, of local people on the ground, doing everything they can to try to be helpful to their fellow citizens. We thank everyone who are putting themselves in harm's risk to save the lives of their neighbors. There's no substitute for that. People acting selflessly to help their fellow West Virginians. Once the waters began to recede, all of us have been focusing on restoring power. I'm here with some good news that as of this morning, 55,909 West Virginians had their power restored over the last few days. And as of the timing for this report, that left only 8,319 homes without power. So every day we're making progress. And part of the reason we're making progress is there's a natural cadence to this. When you have water everywhere, you have to allow the water to recede. And then you have to clean the debris and all the blockage from the road, and then fix the road to allow people to go through again. That allows the linemen to go through and to do the good work that they're doing. So it's been a team effort. We know that Department of Highways has been out being very helpful, and that facilitates the linemen's good work. We know that vehicles and equipment from the Department of Transportation, they're still working, and they're doing everything they can to help clean up the region. I do want to mention one thing before we get into a more somber topic. We know that over the next 72 hours, we're expecting some difficult weather conditions yet again. We know that we're expecting several rounds of snow which are estimated to produce between 4 to 6 inches of snow along and south of the I-64 corridor. We know that some of the mountain counties could see snow of up to 8 inches, but also below zero overnight temperatures. So we want to urge everyone to be very safe. Don't assume that everything is fine in terms of if you see icy conditions, if you see water, you have to use good judgment and not go near that. To the extent you can, stay in your home and be prepared for the next couple days. We know that we're expecting drier conditions to return on Friday with a gradual warm-up for the weekend. Sadly, we do have some additions to the fatality report. We know now that there are 2 individuals that have been reported dead from McDowell County. That's Donald and Debbie Griffin from Welch. We also know that there's another individual that is still missing, now been several days missing. So obviously there are efforts going over with canines to try to locate that individual. We also know that last night that there was a firefighter in McDowell County who died. And as we get more details related to that, we're going to pass them along to you. As per our practice, once the families are notified, that's when we try to provide you with the names, because it's important to be respectful for the families during this time. Our state and all of her agencies have had a unified response during this time since the beginning of this emergency, working in conjunction with the people on the ground who really are out in front, taking the lead, quite frankly, doing the lion's share of the work. I can't say that enough. As I mentioned earlier, DOT is out working, removing hazards from the travel areas and around the state. DOT has deployed crew members and staff to the hardest hit areas. We know that Cabell, Lincoln, Logan, Mingo, and Wayne have experienced some road slides and slips in the road and some washouts. Fayette, Greenbrier, Monroe, Nicholas, and Summers still have high water in their communities. And we also know that McDowell, Wyoming, Mercer, and Raleigh have experienced some significant flooding, but the water is receding with the road assessments and clearing underway. Couple things for folks to know at home. There's some major road closures that as of the time I came before to give this briefing, we have road closures in Cabell, Braxton, Mercer County, Mingo, McDowell, Wayne, Wyoming, Greenbrier, on some of the major arteries. We would urge you to look at the Department of Transportation's website for more information so you can get that information before you go out and drive. We want everyone to be safe and exercise good judgment before they drive. We know that the National Guard has been busy at work, and I'm very pleased that we have General Seward with us today. He and his team have been doing outstanding work. They have 5 liaison officer teams down to assess, assist, and coordinate emergency support operations for affected areas. We know that there are a number of people in emergency support who are either deployed or stand ready to deploy as the circumstances arise. And that's critical, whether we're talking about issues such as community assistance teams with vehicles to assist local agencies, loader dump trucks and teams, logistical support teams, and some light, medium tactical vehicles to support ongoing operations. Moving on to Department of Education, as of today, 4 school districts were experiencing closures: McDowell, Mingo, Raleigh, and Wayne. We had 15 school districts which were experiencing delays: Barber, Cabell, Hancock, Lewis, Lincoln, Marion, Mason, Mercer, Ohio, Pendleton, Preston, Randolph, Tucker, Upshur, and Wayne. Moving on with respect to a DEP issue, the DEP has asked me to alert the public that there's an abandoned mine in Logan County that's discharging. Last night, when we heard of that, that was a big gusher of water. I'm told that that has slowed down considerably. When we get more information, we'll let you know. But state resources and water diversion tools were on the scene last night. It's our understanding that it had impacted just one resident and 2 roads. As we get more information, as per our policy, we will assuredly let you know. We don't have any injuries reported from that. But we know that as the flow subsides, DEP is going to coordinate with the contractors to install a more permanent solution. A couple items on the health side. Over 250 doses of tetanus shots were delivered to Williamson Memorial Hospital and to Wyoming County. Williamson is still, in part, currently without water, with approximately 3,000 residents affected. McDowell County has about 2,000 residents without water. We've now sent over 67,000 bottles of water. I think that the resources are starting to flow in from a lot of different places. When I was down at that Williamson Field House yesterday, they mentioned to me that local citizens were helping, donating water. People from across the state were helping out, and people from as far away as Texas were chipping in. So I'm grateful to so many of the people that are stepping up during this time of need. The team at the Williamson Water Plant, they're working really hard and they're making progress. They're almost completed pumping out the raw water at the facility, and they're going to be doing a test this morning. When we have more information about that, we will let you know. There are boil notices that are still in place for the following public service districts: Williamson, McDowell, Kermit, Mingo, and Crum. Now, a couple other updates. We know that right now the state police, the fire marshal, and the corrections agency, they're continuing to operate drones in the affected areas. The drones can be very helpful for the surveying of damage and also to make sure we can target assistance to those in the right places. We know that officers from DNR have been part of the process as well. We know that they've been part of some of the water rescues. It's my understanding that DNR has been involved in at least 11 helping people getting out of their flooded homes. As we learn more information on the water rescues, we will let you know. Another item to report, there's still officers busy down in Welch with a search and recovery effort to find what we believe would be that lost or that missing person. Equipment's going to be used on a raft, and they're looking not far from where I was yesterday. I want to also mention that there are ways for citizens to continue to provide information to be helpful to your fellow West Virginians. We urge people to fill out a survey if you have information about damage in your area that you'd like to share with our emergency management team. So folks can go online to emd.wv.gov// I always get those two confused, /disaster survey. Let me repeat that again. emd.wv.gov/disaster survey. This is really helpful because when folks do it online and help, first of all, it allows local officials to know more about what's going on. It allows state officials to know, because we want to make sure that there's a good communication system between local officials on the ground and the state. That's the most effective way to make progress. And I think that's something you're going to be hearing a lot more about in the days, weeks, and months ahead. I know overall the flooding situation remains unsafe and dangerous in a number of areas. Once again, do not attempt to travel through flooded roads. Turn around. Take precautions. West Virginia continues to deploy all the resources at its disposal, and we also are working closely with the charitable groups. There have been incredible efforts, whether through Red Cross and other charitable organizations. Please reach out to those local organizations for help. On a separate note, I'd like to just personally thank Marshall President Brad Smith. He just donated $10,000 to Fishes and Loaves, the main food bank out of Welch. So thank you to President Smith for that generosity. West Virginia, we're going to be there every step of the way, and I'm grateful that we've had a chance to see some of the damage firsthand, but see the reaction in the community to make sure that we're coming together as a state. So I want to thank everyone for coming and ask if General Seward has any additional comments.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. I'd just like to thank the members of the National Guard who are in their communities. We met many of them yesterday. They weren't in this uniform. They might have been in a state police uniform or working at a food bank. That's the great thing about the National Guard. They're in our communities, and they're serving their fellow citizens in many different ways. And that local knowledge was very helpful for me yesterday while we were on scene. State police officer providing us information about a local hauler that might be in trouble. We were able to make sure our resources were out there. And then in Welch yesterday, a gentleman came up. We were trying to stay out of the way of the folks that were doing work, and a local gentleman came up and spoke to the governor and said he'd like to volunteer somewhere, and the governor told him to go to the county emergency management at the local armory, the old armory. And while we were there, half an hour later, I saw that gentleman come in. And that's really what's happening in the communities across West Virginia, is West Virginians taking care of each other, and it was extremely impressive. So, thank you, Governor. That's all I have.
We have time for a couple questions. Stephen.
Yeah, Steve Adams, Ogden Newspapers. I know obviously all focus right now is dealing with the current situation at hand. But when this is all done, I know you've got a responsibility, and you'll have a responsibility too, depending on consolidation of departments in regards to disaster mitigation recovery. I know the resiliency office is within the governor's office. You appoint the resiliency officer. They just developed an updated state flood protection plan for the first time since 2004. What are your plans going forward in regards to that office, and specifically for trying to marshal state resources for flood mitigation so future floods or the damage of future floods can be lessened to some extent?
You know, Stephen, it's a great question, and the way we're handling this is that we have the immediate short-term issues. So we have to make sure that we're dealing with everything on the ground so that we're helping people who need that assistance right away. So as the water recedes and we're getting to some of the rebuilding efforts, that's kind of the next phase of the process. There will be a point, and it will come sooner rather than later, that what you do is after an event like this, you do a post-event assessment and you review everything that happened at the beginning, how everything got handled from the onset through the end, and then I think you try to have critical learnings about what happened with all the different entities involved, with emergency management, with all of the agencies that are involved, how the process has worked historically, what happened today, and if you can continue to make improvements in the process. That's what we're going to do. We know that there hadn't been an update on that flood assessment for a very long time, and that had not received the attention that it had needed. We want to come back to you and have the chance to look at that and make further recommendations to the public about where that stands. Now, I will also note that West Virginia, because of its topography, has challenges. People know as you fly over and you see the hills and hollers that there naturally, when you have heavy rain, like in some counties when you have 5 inches of rain come in, there's literally no place for the water to go. It's very, very difficult. And so we have to evaluate that. We also know that when you take Williamson, for example, there was a time before they had the flood wall, and so these were problems that existed in a very, very serious way. The flood wall obviously helps now in a way that it didn't before it existed. The towns are less vulnerable. But I think we have to have that broader assessment because West Virginia is prone to some of the weather activity and the flooding just because of the nature of our mountains. But we'll have the chance to look at all those issues and make sure, I will say this to you, protecting our citizens and making sure that they're kept safe during difficult times, that's job one of a governor. We're going to do everything we can, and we're going to have the right personnel in place to make sure that that happens. I really want to thank all the people who've been involved so far, and also a lot of the local people. When I was down in Welch yesterday, I met with their emergency management team. I met with a young delegate, David Green, who's actually very talented, and he was helping coordinate because that was the best place for him to be. And he was doing a lot of things very impressive to point out the specific things that are needed. I mention that because we want to make sure we put the most talented people in all these positions. That's what we're going to do after this process and over the upcoming months and years ahead.
Thank you.
Jordan.
So I'm just curious, so what specifically made you realize, hey, we need to ask for some federal assistance from the Trump administration? And what are you hoping to get following asking for this declaration from the Trump administration?
So I think that we had been preparing for that over the last couple of days, but also after I went down on the ground and we saw the conditions. There's always going to be some disconnect when you're getting information from afar versus touring on the ground because you have access to much more information. And so we saw firsthand what was going on, especially in McDowell and Mingo counties. And so having that information, we thought these are some of the hardest hit areas, and we think that the likelihood of getting approval here would be high, and that would be needed to facilitate recovery within these areas. So that's why we decided to submit it, but we had been getting that ready, and in fact, the previous few days had deployed the drones, I mentioned from state police, the fire marshal, corrections, to begin to assess better the conditions on the ground. Sometimes it's challenging, though. I will note that certain areas in Mingo County, for instance, even as of yesterday, were not fully accessible via the road. So it's hard to actually make an assessment about everything that's needed. But you can start to pick up information locally by talking to citizens and knowing this is what's going on, this is what's happening with these water rescues, this is historically how people have handled it.
So like what federal assistance specifically are you hoping to receive, once the declaration is received?
Yeah, so we asked for a disaster declaration, and I wrote the letter to the president. Obviously, we are working closely with FEMA and Homeland Security to get some of the individual and the public assistance that's needed. Individuals that may be harmed, but also on the public side. So, for instance, think roads when they're washed out and there are a lot of problems, or bridges, that there are different types of assistance that can flow through. That's what we're doing. Katie.
So, how critical, you touched on it. This is not the first time that flooding has happened here, and unfortunately, I think we all know it's not going to be the last time. How critical are those FEMA dollars, if we get them, going to be to rebuilding what was destroyed in this flood, and also the mitigation process? And I have a follow-up after.
Yeah, I think we're going to know more as we have damage assessments, and we've started the process and we know that there is damage, but rather than put an exact number on it right now, I like to, I think to gather information, and when I say it to you, have confidence that the information I'm giving to you is accurate. But certainly it warranted us submitting an application, so we thought it would be very helpful for the citizens of Southern West Virginia. In terms of what that means in terms of total dollar amounts, I think that's to be determined.
Do you think it'd be fair to say it's more than we could handle on our own as a state?
Yeah, well, we obviously asked for assistance because we thought that we needed help from the federal government, and I think that that's a safe thing to say. It would be beneficial if this declaration is approved, and that's why I asked. I try not to ask for things unless I actually want them and the state needs them, so I'm very hopeful. As I mentioned a couple days ago, I spoke with Kristi Noem, the Federal Homeland Security Department head, and she had talked very positively about trying to provide help to our state. So obviously we're following up on that.
And given the recognition that, unfortunately, based on our topography and every time it floods, the floodplain grows, right?
Yeah.
Are you at all concerned about pushes of the Trump administration that have called for a dismantling and a reorganization of FEMA, including the funds that we're hoping to receive?
Look, right now my focus is on helping as many people in the state as possible. So That's got my undivided attention, and I want to make sure that we have systems that work at the local level, that work at the state level, and then I want to partner effectively with the relevant folks on the federal side as well. So I'm not going to get into any of those issues right now. I'm going to focus on what's the readiness, the preparedness that we have right here in West Virginia. I think it's important for people to know that the way the process is supposed to work is that the local folks are out in front. They're taking the lead, they're identifying problems, they're fixing problems, and then when they need help, traditionally, they call the state, we get involved, and obviously as the state needs help, we reach out to the federal government. So we're going to work with anyone in all these positions to help make sure we have good systems in place. I have time for 2 more questions.
Could you clarify the number of fatalities in the
Yeah.
locations?
Absolutely. So we have announced at least 2 fatalities from McDowell County, and we believe those individuals are from Welch. Then we have a missing individual, and we'll alert you on that person as with search and recovery, looking for that individual. And then separately, we know that there was a firefighter in McDowell County, and there's currently an investigation to evaluate all of the issues and the causes of that, whether it's directly related or indirectly related to the flooding. Any other questions? Katie, go ahead.
Briefly,
Yeah.
about the firefighter death, do we have any details other than there was a death? Was he responding to some, we know it's flood related, I'm assuming.
No, so we don't know that.
Okay.
We may make some assumptions, but I'd rather, as we get more information, we're going to let you know. And part of the reason, I revealed the names of 2 people
Yeah.
because the next of kin had been notified. So I'm not aware that that's happened yet. So I'm only going to give that to you once I know. But we know that that happened last night. And as we learn more about that, I'd be happy to share that with you.
Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah. Guys, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and know that we're going to keep working and staying on top of this. Thank you, and be well.
Thanks, Doug.